When was your biggest I should not be laughing moment? When I was 19, I was pulled over and given a speeding ticket. I decided to fight it as I only had my G2 at the time, an Ontario license, and the ticket would have meant demerit points and a decent amount of money. I get the letter in the mail, and on the day of the appointment, I show up at town hall where they handle the traffic disputes with my mom. What we didn't know was that everyone got the same letter with the same date and time, and it's first come, first served. The place is packed. We end up waiting about 3 hours before I even got to talk to anyone. Fortunately, they reduced the ticket, no demerit points, and a lot cheaper, and then it's off to another room where the judge makes it official. The room with the judge is quieter than a church, and everyone is seated in window pews to boot. So my mom and I take our seats and wait for me to get called up. Another hour passes. Finally, the woman who was in line directly before me gets called up to face the judge. My mom and I share a look, thinking that we'll finally be able to go home soon. Now, to give a little context, the room was laid out so there was a small waist height banister separating the judge from the church pews. Seated by the exit was a police officer, and another officer was seated among everyone else in the pews, a few rows back from where I was sitting, right in the front. This woman had been complaining earlier, quite loudly, about her bad knee. Now, as she limps her way up to the front, she stumbles and catches herself against the banister. Everyone is asking if she's all right. She nods, brushes it off, says she's fine, and then she farts. To this day, this has got to be the loudest fart I have ever heard, and I swear it echoed throughout the whole room. I froze. I look over at my mom, who is the perfect mirror of the horrified expression I had, and then we started to laugh. It was a long day. I was exhausted, stressed, and nervous, and that fart just broke all the tension that had been building up throughout the day. Both my mom and I are trying to hold back our laughter, covering our mouths and crying from the effort. I glance around and realize no one else is laughing, which somehow makes it funnier. Finally, it's too much for my mom. She's laughing so hard that she can't get her flip-flop back on, so she half walks and half limps out the room, dragging her shoe behind her. As she passes the officer by the door, I realize that he's grinning too. When he sees my mom, he gets out of his seat, bows to the judge, and quickly ducks out after her, also trying to hold back the giggles. I'm starting to panic. I know that if I laugh in front of the judge, I'm in serious trouble. I look around the room, hand still over my mouth, red in the face from trying to keep quiet. I turn around and there's the second officer. She has the same exact expression as me, hand over mouth, red in the face, shaking from laughing so hard. We make eye contact and she loses it. So out she goes, following after my mother and the first officer, holding back until she can safely laugh outside. I don't know how I did it, but I managed to calm down enough to face the judge without breaking into giggles. When I finally leave to pay my fine, the three of them are still outside, smiling and giggling. One of the officers sees me, grins, and says, "Well, I hope you learned something today." "Yes, officer. Yes, I definitely learned something today that we can start a video with a pretty good banger like this one, and even in the most uptight of situations, we can all loosen up just a little bit to let out some laughters. Yes, to let out some laughter. Now, was it just me, or were you also able to imagine her mom trying to escape from that room while dragging her one foot trying to put her flip-flop back on? Let's go ahead and move on to the next story. It should be just as good as this one. This is story 2. Now, several years ago, I was brought along to a small gathering of strangers by a friend who didn't want to make an appearance on her own. The event was ostensibly being held as a casual get-together. After all, I wouldn't have attended otherwise. But less than half an hour after I'd been introduced to everyone, the overall atmosphere took a turn for much heavier territory. We had been discussing some forgettable topic or another and enjoying a few drinks when the hostess all but jumped into the first moment of silence. "So, my sister just had a miscarriage." The statement was uttered with absolutely no warning or transition from the subject at hand, as though it had been trying to force its way out of the woman's mind for some time. And needless to say, everyone seemed a little bit shocked by it. As soon as they recovered, though, each attendee immediately started offering their condolences, leaving me to feel like the odd man out in what was obviously a very sensitive situation. Given that I had only met most of the assembled people mere minutes prior, I figured that the best course of action was to make myself as unobtrusive as possible, so I sat back and pretended to be incredibly interested in my class. It was then that I saw a young child come trundling into the living room with a collection of tiny stuffed animals clutched in her hands. At first, nobody paid much attention to the toddler's arrival. After a few seconds, though, she approached her mother and let loose with a string of whiny gibberish. The hostess seemed to understand what was being said and responded with a dismissive tone, not unlike one that I remembered from my own childhood. "Not right now, honey," the woman whispered. "Go play by yourself for a little while." The child didn't seem to like this answer, replying as she did with a scowl that hinted at an oncoming tantrum. "I'll come check on you soon," continued the hostess. "Right now, Mommy is busy with her friends. Go play." The kid seemed ready to scream. She threw her stuffed toys down on the floor and stomped her foot, but a gentle push from her mother sent the girl away before anything worse could occur. The conversation among the adults immediately resumed, and I watched with widening eyes as the child snatched up one of her belongings, stormed off, and entered the doorway leading to the restroom. A few seconds later, I heard an ominous flushing noise. It didn't take much thought to figure out what had happened, and I quickly fought to suppress the grin that started working its way across my face. That proved to be incredibly different. However, when the toddler came back into the living room, she selected another one of her toys, then went through the entire routine again. By the time that I heard the second flushing sound, I was nearly overcome by giggling fits, and throughout the whole thing, the people around me were speaking in low tones about the most horrific loss that an expecting mother could endure. My friend eventually noticed my hysteria, and I hurriedly murmured an explanation, as best I could through my poorly concealed snorts of laughter. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. The young woman watched as the little girl returned for a third toy, her face still a mask of resentment, made her way back to the bathroom door, and disappeared. I fought to keep from bursting out into tears of merriment when still a third flush became audible. Story 3. The following scenario was by far the strongest I have ever had to try in my life not to laugh. So, I work the front desk at a hotel. A woman comes to check in and has her son with her, who is mentally disabled. He looks to be about 10 years old, but with an obviously lower than normal intellect and mental age. He has a stuffed horse with him that he is lovingly clutching when he walks in. He proceeds to quite calmly go over and obediently sit on the couch while his mother comes to the desk. I start to go about the process of checking her into the hotel when suddenly the son calls for his mom's attention. He starts yelling, "Mom, look, look, look!" I just happened to, oh God, I should have kept my eyes down, look up to see that the boy has taken his stuffed horse and is making it hump the arm of the couch. This is pretty funny, but I'm an expert at this and I maintain composure and keep moving along, checking her in. The mother has ignored him so far and has not noticed his stuffed horse doing the nasty with the furniture yet. It's at this point that he yells out, "Mom, Mom, look, he's doing what you told me not to do. He's doing it, Mom. What you told me not to do." I'm absolutely breaking at the seams now. My mouth is twitching. I'm trying so hard not to laugh. He continues, the stuffed horse now being made to do it to the couch ever more furiously. "Mom, look, is he gonna get in trouble? He's doing it, not me. He's doing that bad thing. Remember that thing you told me not to do?" I snapped. I could no longer hold it in, and I just burst out laughing uncontrollably. His mother had actually not yet turned around to acknowledge what he was trying to show her, so as of yet, she had no idea. When I finally burst out laughing, she turned and was obviously horrified. She turned back to me with a face as bright red as a fire engine, hurriedly got her room keys, and ushered him away as swiftly as possible. All while the son is still asking her if the stuffed horse is going to get in trouble like he did. I felt so bad for laughing and for her embarrassment, but that was just too much. Story 4. This is the worst I've ever felt laughing at someone. My brother and I traveled a lot when I was a kid. Our parents are divorced and my dad is a pilot, so we'd fly every few weeks to visit family or take a trip with our dad. Well, one particular flight we get on and there's a country-looking kid across the aisle from us about our age who looks really nervous. We say hi and he tells us that it's his first time flying and that his parents sent him to his grandparents on his own. We try to calm him down initially, but he's definitely white-knuckled for takeoff. As soon as we're in the air, he gets his CD player out and puts on what we quickly found out was a Shania Twain album. Now, how do I know for a fact that he was listening to a full Shania Twain album? Because he quite obviously wasn't familiar with the sound of the background noise on a plane, he had cranked the volume on his headphones and was singing along with every song. It wasn't all that bad at first. You could kind of hear him humming along, and then he'd pipe up for a loud, crisp chorus and sort of drift away until the chorus hit again. Because he was so nervous, no one wanted to make him more uncomfortable by telling him, and it wasn't really that bothersome, but a good half of the plane could hear him when he hit the chorus each time, and more of us were getting into laughing fits each time he'd hit the high notes. The flight attendants bought the portly gentleman sitting next to him a drink to make up for the random Shania outbursts he was being subjected to, but mostly because it wasn't too bothersome for anyone to feel the need to let the poor kid know. Then it happened. He goes full on for his favorite song and starts belting out, "Man, I feel like a woman." Everyone around us absolutely losing their mind. My brother and I are crying and choking because we're laughing so hard and gasping for air. Then someone fills in on the next round enthusiastically. It takes the flight attendant a good half of the song to compose herself enough to lightly tap his shoulder and let him know. Meanwhile, all of us around him have our heads buried in our arms, and I have my whole face wrapped up in one of those little blankets that's now soaked in tears. The whole build-up and finale were just so damn funny. No one wanted to embarrass the kid, but it escalated so perfectly that it had to be done. When the flight attendant spoke to him, it was the first time he had actually talked to someone over the jet noise, and he immediately realized how loud he must have been because the next time I looked at him, he looked mortified, white with panic. I still feel bad, but damn, was that funny? Story 5. Okay, for some weird reason, my brother and I could not stop laughing when we had to go pick out the casket for our mother's funeral. In all fairness, my brother started it. Our other older brother and sister were with us, and they kept looking at us two like, behave. The funeral director was this tall, pale, skinny guy in an ill fitting suit, the pants of which were a good 2 inches too short. He was acting way too schmaltzy and speaking in dulcet tones. He took us into this room, sat down at his desk, and there was a light switch behind him with a red light. My brother and I looked at the light switch and then at each other. Well, that made us both start giggling, and that pissed off our older sister. Then the director guy pressed the light switch, and I swear a door panel opened up into this huge room, the size of a gym, full of caskets. This totally set us off. We tried to one-up each other every minute or two. We walked past a bronze casket, and my brother said, "Do you have any gold caskets? Our mother liked gold." I interrupted and said, "When mom had her colors done, they said she was a winter. That means she can be buried only in silver tones." As we walked past an especially hideous pink casket, I blurted out, "She'd drop if we buried her in that." Our older sister and brother, who were acting all "we're so mature," fell out laughing, and my sister said, "She's already gone." Then we laughed again, really loud and snorty, and the funeral director looked nervous as hell. Jeez. It made me wonder if no one had ever laughed there before. I don't remember what casket we finally picked out, but mom didn't clash with it, whatever it was. And no, in case you're wondering, we loved mom like crazy. She laughed on weird occasions all the time with us. It was sort of poetic that we'd laugh like that when she passed away. I guess, like mother, like children, it's nice, really nice to see that they're continuing her mother's legacy by making jokes, even at her expense. Good times, good times. Now, is laughing uncontrollably also a hidden talent of yours? Please make sure to show your appreciation by liking and subscribing for a regular dose of relatable stories. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. This is story 6. Now, a bit of backstory. I play pen and paper RPGs. I have a thing for feelies or physical documents and objects that represent the game in the real world. One of these for a one-shot horror game was a list of inmates at an asylum. I ran out of imagination halfway through and began just writing down the first words that came into my head. Thus, the creation of the venerable Beep Feep, a teenage deviant. I have no idea why, but just thinking of that name gives me giggles. I'm giggling now. Anyway, several months later, I'm on the subway when the name of Beep Feep wanders past my conscious thought for no reason. I immediately start giggling, but I try to control it, which doesn't work at all. I'm trying all my tricks here, punching myself in the leg and biting my bottom lip, but none of them are working. I'm still laughing like an idiot because Beep Feep is somehow incorrigibly hilarious to me. This is when I realized that I'm staring at someone, specifically at a very surly looking Indian guy sitting across from me. For the last 5 minutes, I have been maintaining unknowing eye contact with this man while laughing and hitting myself. He's getting increasingly visibly angry, which my already demented brain parses as being extra hilarious, resulting in a downward spiral of laughter, hitting, and anger. He eventually stops off the train in a huff, and I just lost it. Story 7. I was at my godfather's funeral. He was high up in government, so there were lots of very official and high ranking people there. But there were also people like my dad who were his best friends, some of whom he had grown up with and went to university with. Dad grew up with him but didn't go to university. Anyway, my dad's friend Phil tells this story about how when he and my godfather first became friends, my godfather walked into the pub Phil was in. They had never met before, but somehow this meeting had been arranged. Put his Mercedes keys in the bar and ordered some expensive drinks, and Phil thought I wasn't going to get on with this guy. They got tipsy together and ended up singing Meatloaf's Bat Out of Hell, and that event perfectly summed up my godfather. So just before they take his coffin out of the church, they start playing Bat Out of Hell, and I look at my dad, who was sitting at the front of the church. He turns around with a look of, "Don't you dare," and I burst out laughing. I couldn't stop. This just summed up my godfather so well and was how I remembered him as a less strict, more fun version of my dad. As the coffin was being picked up, I had to leave the church through a side door. When I've calmed down, I go out to see it being lowered. Later, all my godfather's friends meet at the local pub, and Phil comes up to me and says, "You know, everyone could hear you, even after you left. Some people outside were going. He shouldn't have been invited if he doesn't have respect. I stuck up for you and told them you were his godson and had every right to remember him your way, mainly because I was about to burst out laughing myself, and I just started laughing again." Story 8. It was 2008, shortly after the market dived. There had been a lot of layoffs at work, and many of our friends had lost their jobs. My husband's best friend had passed the year before, and we were making a trip to the cemetery to lay flowers on the grave and be all somber. We're driving down the road in the cemetery when all of a sudden this squirrel comes out of nowhere and darts across the road. I look back and see him gone on the road. He must have hit our rear tire. It was just so weird. The squirrel didn't even pause, and that's when I got the giggles. My husband was not amused at all when I made up this whole story about this squirrel who must have lost his job in the oak tree. And so he obviously ended himself so his little squirrel family would get the insurance money. And I hoped he had his insurance policy long enough to pay out for that because you can't just buy one and then go run into a moving car the next day. There is usually a 2-year waiting period for that. I was dying. Tears were streaming down my face. My husband was so annoyed with me and asked me to stay in the car when he got to his friend's grave. I just could not stop. Every time I started to get control of myself, I thought of some other silly scenario and was doubled over again. Yes, I'm a weirdo, but I crack myself up. This story, I'm gonna have to side with the husband. But hey, whatever floats her boat and gets her to deal with those kinds of emotions, all good for her. Story 9. My grandpa passed away at 89 years of age. Everyone at the funeral was older, plus the senior citizen home was close by, so a lot of old friends came from there. The thing is, these old people were hilarious, barely conscious most of the time. They'd perk up when the choir was singing. They'd all been in the same singing group, but none of them could hold a tune anymore. The real problem was that, well, this one old gal was basically deaf and blind and her sense of smell didn't work anymore. So she didn't realize that she was farting up a storm, but then she lets out a fart that makes her plastic funeral home chair vibrate, and she just kind of raises her head, nudges her husband right next to her, and goes, "Oh my lord, was that me?" Everyone is following this, despite the fact that there is a speaker up front. The poor guy was trying to be heartfelt and honor my grandpa, but these old people were not making it easy for him. The old man goes, "Nah, honey, it was me." The sweetest thing. Then the grandma goes sniff sniff real loud and tells him, "You shouldn't lie to me. That was me. Yours smells different." And the old guy goes, "No, honey, see, and farts too. I lost it. And I wasn't the only one. I saw a 50-year-old businessman with tears running down his face, stuffing his entire fist in his mouth in order not to laugh out loud. I pretended like I was crying, buried my face in my elbow, and left the building with heaving shoulders. When I was outside, I ran around the corner and laughed my bum off. I came back to have a smoke, drenched in sweat, when I saw my three siblings similarly run out of the funeral home, spring away, and double over laughing. The grandma had smelled her own fart and commented, "Oh, that's quite bad. Must have been yours all along." So it's four people in a graveyard at a funeral on their knees, wheezing with laughter. Aw, now if this isn't the sweetest, cutest story that I've heard so far, I don't know what is. But I do know now that when I get all old and wrinkly, I want my partner to be able to do the same thing for me, and of course, I'd easily do the same thing for her. Story 10. In high school, our biology room had the rather normal large black tables with electrical outlets sticking up at the top. One day during class, while the teacher was lecturing, my buddy Steve was sitting at our table, playing with a pair of those small ancient steel scissors that poorly funded districts always have in surplus. I was largely listening to the teacher when suddenly I saw a bright flash out of the corner of my eye. I look in the direction of the flash to see Steve with one end of the scissors stuck into the electrical outlet, jerking violently. My first reaction was, "Oh my god, Steve's going to go." The second was hysterical, uncontrollable laughter. The worst part was that our whole table had the same reaction. Two of us literally fell out of the chairs, all too paralyzed by laughter to help our friend, like some kind of trap devised by the Joker. Luckily, in the end, Steve was fine, not even hurt. The jerking was due to the current welding the scissor tip into the outlet and him trying to break it free and get it out. When he finally did, it snapped the point off, leaving part of it inside the outlet and creating scissors with one side scorched and shorter than the other. But I'll never forget the day I thought my friend was fading fast but was laughing too hard to do anything about it. Alright, why is it so much funnier when you're not supposed to laugh? For more unexpected comedy, go watch the next one. What made you laugh the hardest in your entire life? Story 2 is a goldmine and got me laughing pretty good. I'll see you in that video, and thank you for watching this one.